Okay, I think we are recording, yes. It does appear that we're recording. Okay, all right, well, cool. Well, I'm glad we can officially, whoops, I'm glad we can officially start now.
Sounds
Mute
cool.
that. Yeah. Well, how's it going, Well?
It's going all right.
You
Yeah, I mean things have been okay. Still learning stuff. I'm in a without getting too much into it. I'm a bit of in a transition, kind of moving and whatnot, and changing studios. So doing a lot of that. There's a lot of emotions involved in that, but otherwise all right.
know?
Doing a lot of art teaching, which is good.
And we also have River who's here, so I'll swing around and face River. And then River, do you want to get like in the angle of the like, do you want to get in the shot so that you can like kind of pull up a chair next to Will? Would that be all right? And then we'll just kind of keep going as an informal sort of discussion.
We have that other dude here too.
Yeah, you can get in the shot too if you want. And so I did have kind of a focus of the discussion because I thought, well, you did a song last week where you talked about a really transcendent sensory experience that you had. And I don't know of another way to describe it. But I really do feel like it was, to borrow your phraseology for it, a visitation.
Yes.
And I kind of thought we could start off as that. You know, we talked about the Fermi paradox last week, and then you jumped into that song, which I thought was kind of an interesting jumping off point for two kind of questions. So I'll let you tell your story, and then I guess the two questions that I thought would be good central topics for a spiritual discussion would be, number one, you know, if we've been visited by spirits or aliens or individuals from another dimension or another world or another plane of existence, what have they been trying to tell us? What should they be trying to tell us? And as an interesting thought experiment, if we had a path to travel to another planet that was maybe less advanced than us, pre-industrial or something, what would we tell them? So starting with those topics, I'll let you kind of jump into what you're gonna.
Okay. So I guess I will start with answering I think the last question just very simply. What would I tell them? Stay primitive. Don't industrialize. Keep art important and compassion, and know that involvement and advancement is not measured on what you build and your technological developments. It's something much deeper. That's what I would tell them.
Do you think that's possible? Like, do you think the progress of technology and industrialization is inevitable?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I believe that it depends on our focus. It depends on maybe a number of factors. And as it's something that's essentially untested, you can't really point out which factors those would be. But I believe very much so that consciousness evolution are teething, as it were, as this type of being as we are. Um, it does not have to immediately view the world in a pliable way, or like this is something I can build and this is we're going to chop this down to build this. I think that animals, conscious animals and entities can evolve to a place of gentleness. They can evolve to a place where their technology is much more based on communion with nature and manipulation of, or should I say, working with flora. Um, the elves of Rivendell or Lothlorien, for example. I like to use this as an example. I kind of view that as a prophecy of what we can be if we evolve, but I also see it as a path of light, of conscious life that evolved without industrialized technology. But they're very advanced. They're more advanced than us because they can talk to trees. They have rope that never breaks. You know, they have cloaks that will conceal you completely. All of these things, but they don't have industry. They don't have forges, big iron factories making weapons. So no, I do not think it is inevitable for us to be technologically advanced and still evolve as life forms.
But some of those technologies that the elves had in Lord of the Rings, especially the movies, were just obvious to our modern eyes, something that we could do if we set our minds to it, there was a market for it. That sort of thing in that environment was, I mean, they obviously had higher technology than even we do today. No such wasn't thought. Tolkien was famous being cheeky, being British, saying he despised allegory forms, but everywhere is World War I throughout all the adventures, as a sort of saying what you're saying, so why don't we use this technology where it's making the reader stand up and demand that the whole time. So it's kind of a spiritual experience of people who are fans of Lord of the Rings unite across the street. We see each other and we feel that sort of connection togetherness and almost a stage of salvation, more optimistic. Just that there's more of us, it gives us more hope. That idea is agreed with even subliminally. And I digress. Sorry.
Well, if you want, no, it's okay. And if you want to pull up a chair to get to stay in frame, you can.
I'll let you guys continue.
Yeah.
Anything that mentions the Lord of the Rings, I'm sorry I have to interject. You guys are, thank you. I'll be right back.
Yeah. But I want you to tell your story about what you said on the open mic, if it's okay.
Yeah, it
if you feel
absolutely
comfortable
is.
sharing it.
Yeah. In fact, what's kind of interesting is I'm going to be moving out, at least temporarily, to the place where this happened. So I don't know if it'll happen again. Probably not. So this was something that happened about 8 to 10 years ago, closer to 8. And I was basically in my room, in bed. I was out in Elmira, basically out in the country. And I was in a relaxed state, but I was very much awake and laying down. And sometimes, if you get to that place where you're like, yeah, I'm definitely awake, but I'm really relaxed. Or I'm not dreaming, but it's like it's a good place, very conscious, but very relaxed. And so all of a sudden I start hearing music. And the music was very, and I don't want to say techno music because it wasn't like cheating type of techno, but it was more like it was made by robots. It sounded very sciencey. I don't know how else to really explain it. The music was, but it was musical at the same time. It wasn't like background fuzz. But I was like, well, this is interesting. And it also sounded like it was coming from like underneath, like a pair of headphones underneath a pile of clothing, like muffled, but very much there. And so I'm listening to this, and all of a sudden, out from my window, which looks out into kind of a large yard and then a road, not very populated area, I see some lights, or, it looked like a flashlight. I'm like, wait, what's that, a flashlight? I'm like, oh, somebody is on the property. So I'm watching, and I'm, kind of looking, and my heart's racing a little bit. And I'm watching these lights come closer, and there's at least three of them. And they just keep getting closer and closer. And I'm like, are these flashlights? And I'm kind of freaking out a little bit. But they get ever so closer, and they're coming right to me. They're going right to my window. It's like they're looking at me. And as they come closer, it's 3 humanoid forms, light, tall, thin, white light. They were made of light, kind of. And they were very distinct, and they clearly came up to my room, and I sat up in bed, and I was like, what? And then all of a sudden, there was a big flash of light, everything was light, and then everything stopped. The music was stopped, those creatures were gone, just everything was gone. And it was a very, needless to say, it was a profound experience. I'm no stranger to doing hallucinogens or I'm a psychonaut, and I've explored the realms of the mind as a child before I even knew about any of these things. I've had astral travel experiences, but this was nothing like that. Like, this was so distinctly conscious, and it's funny because I kind of dismissed it for a number of years. It affected me, and it's like something happened, but I wasn't even 100% sure if it was aliens. I'm still not. I didn't see the spaceship or anything like that, but there was something. I have felt entities in the woods. I have felt things like that, and this didn't feel like that. This was something extraterrestrial. So it's
Another planet?
I believe
or
so.
Another dimension?
Either way, it's extra. I don't know for sure. I like to think, or I kind of think that oftentimes the two would be the same. Like a lot of some of our people that might be visiting us or in our universe might be from other dimensions traveling through wormholes. What if only one of the universe can only have one form of life at a time? And so since there's infinite universes in the larger multiverse, the way that we interact with each other is through these wormholes. And so it would be beyond even our own technological, go to space, travel light speed, like even beyond that to get to that point. So, but I don't know.
Some of the elders, like the Hopi and Navajo elders, talking about how actually there's certain people who descend from tribes that are in the Pleiades, and that occasionally they come visit us and they're made of light, some of which comes from our stars. So,
Yeah.
I mean, at the time when I was a kid and I heard about that, I was like, I don't know. But then at the same time, the guy that was saying that, I felt a deep sadness the day that he died, and I could feel that he died, and I knew it. So, I mean, obviously there's some sort of connection between the spirit world, between different dimensions, between perhaps some of that energy happens to hang around in a certain part of the universe. Who knows?
Yeah. It's interesting. I like that idea too. The idea that certain energies might be in certain parts of the universe. There's certain gravities that draw us to certain places. It could be there's a part of the universe or omniverse that where art comes from. That's all the lights and the colors and just everything, and that's where our rhythm and art comes from, or we gravitate towards. It's interesting.
I feel like there's definitely not a binary all necessarily between art and science, though. Like,
True.
a lot of science actually comes from science fiction that isn't art, and from people dreaming. And as somebody who has more of an engineering mind, I can't picture ever looking at things and not seeing how I could manipulate it to be better.
Right.
So,
No, it's true. I know I can get that. And as an artist, I feel similarly. As I look at things and how can it evolve? What's the next? What else could it be? What would be the next sense of composition to take this to the next level? And I think that having that mindset isn't in and of itself a bad thing. I think in and of itself it's a fantastic thing. It's almost like consciously being a part of evolution. But it would need to, I think, be checked somehow by compassion, by all these things, and I think that's where we can manipulate and build. But it doesn't just have to be metal and bricks and tear down the trees to build it. It's
not only that,
it's
yeah, like when the Chinese first invented gunpowder, their thought was to make it into fireworks and into beautiful colors of light that are in the sky, and then somebody with like a more toxic mindset decided to turn it into a weapon.
yeah. Actually, I didn't realize that. That's good to know. That's
like it's all, and a lot of the Native American beliefs, like a lot of the things that I used to hear the elders talking about with my dad late into the night, was about how like people really need to also develop their spiritual side, and like the side that has empathy and compassion and lives with harmony in the world around you, instead of like just using up the resources. And it's kind of like when if you warm your house by firewood, you don't just try to burn up all of the firewood that you can. You try to burn it slowly so that you get the maximum heat for the amount of wood that you burn. And if you're not having a
I'm gonna
better
check
life,
who that is. Keep going.
okay.
But one question that I have that is did he go back that way?
I didn't think so.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure.
I guess my only question, and this is I think the most poignant thing that I'd like you to address, maybe wait till I get back, but this is I think the most poignant question. An alien entity from another planet or from another dimension, what was the point of that? What message were they trying to send? And what was their purpose? I know it's almost an impossible question to answer, but...
Yeah, on that. We'll wait to get back to that one.
that's reminding me of a trip that I had when I was 19, where I like left my body in this I mean, obviously this could just be all in my imagination, but where I left my body in this crystalline pattern of light and spoke to these beings that said, we're either angels or aliens, whatever's not going to scare you as much, and basically consider us like the college students of our dimension, and we're created of light, and you have light within you too. Here, come play with us. And so I went and became light and left my body and turned into a dragon and a spider and all kinds of neat stuff with them. And then I was like this gold and purple light.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to go, they started telling me about all of the sadness and horrors of our world and why they don't want to visit, and why they only visit like weird people like me who they find who just happen to be open to hearing them. And it could have all just been in my imagination or because of drugs or whatever, but like mushrooms.
Right.
And
It doesn't.
And is there any truth to that for you, Will? Do you think there's any part of it that you're saying, maybe this was just inside my head, maybe this was just drugs, maybe this was just some sort of weird flashback or something?
Not that experience. No. Now, I I wasn't completely 100% sober when it happened, but it doesn't mean that I was completely
Maybe I can
head.
just
You know,
don't
I
have to
took a
worry about
toke,
your
and I think I had half a pain pill because I had like a injured shoulder.
Mhm.
So there was a slight little bit of little lucidity, but it was absolutely it was very concrete. I've had experiences where, and I want to say this, where it would be in your head and stuff, but I want to say this because it's one of my favorite quotes from Harry Potter. It's one of my favorite quotes, period, but it's from Harry Potter, and it's at the end of King's Cross chapter in Deathly Hallows, where Harry asked Dumbledore at the very end, he's like, now, is this real or is this happening in my head? And Dumbledore says, well, of course this is happening in your head, but why on earth would that make it not real?
Yeah,
And I love that. It's true. I think that there's a lot of truth. There's those who will sit and meditate 18 hours a day, and they're completely in their heads, and that their energy's everywhere, and they can communicate and
right.
telepathic and all these things.
Oh
So,
yeah, that's another thing that those angel aliens told me, which is that our experience of perception is so limited by our tiny little human bodies and our three-dimensional existence, where we travel through the fourth dimension of time, that like doesn't even really matter if something's not quite real, like, or it's just like a shadow from another dimension or whatever.
yeah. Well, that's cool. That was a profound experience. And I really like we say angels or aliens, because when I've told my mom the story about my alien visitation, she says angels to her.
Yeah,
She's like, those are aliens, those were angels.
yeah.
It's tomato, maybe, but.
To me, they told me whatever makes you feel less scared so that you will chill with us and talk to us.
Yeah.
And why do you think they came to you? Well, what was the purpose of their travel with you?
That's the first thing I asked them.
Yeah.
What was your purpose?
So, I honestly still really don't know. I don't feel it wasn't until fairly recently that I felt like maybe their purpose had anything to do with me specifically. It's weird because I think about it. Is it random? Why me? Why out in Elmira in the middle of nowhere to come to me to that particular window, beelining for me? Like it had to do something with me. But maybe. But then again, who knows? Like I think of some of the stories of people who had abduction stories or this and that, and if there's truth or validity in them, they it's not like those people per se were any. I don't want to. They weren't artists or crazy people. There was a lot of relatively normal people with relatively normal views, connected to basic Western corporate philosophy who've been connected. So it's hard to know, but I think that there is a purpose that doesn't have to just do with me. I think some of it is their purpose.
It's obviously about anal probing.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Well, unfortunately, I missed out on that part. No. But they are testing. They are looking for stuff. They have their own reason for being here. That's part of their larger purpose as entities in a larger organism of life. So I think it would be remiss and even, I don't know, selfish or like maybe narcissistic to think that the purpose was all about me or that it had something to do with my life. I think that I was a player in their purpose in some capacity, but I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think at the same time there's a conjoining purpose. Obviously this is something that happened to me and it's affected me and it's led me, even if it took some years, to some purpose for me. So if anything, what it has done, I think its purpose was to really unquestionably open up my eyes beyond any shadow of a doubt or question that this stuff is real, that there are visitors, that there are other entities. I could take all the DMT or eat all the mushrooms in the world and someone would go, well, you're just tripping, you're on the drugs. Oh, it's real. No, you're on drugs. This was an experience. I was like, no, this was real. This wasn't because of those types of things. And I don't discount my experiences with those other things. I think they're here for a reason. They're an incredibly important part of our heritage. I do a song called Monkey Mushrooms. It's like based on like Terence McKenna's or like the stoned ape theory.
Monkey mushrooms, yeah.
And it's very possible that those types of substances are responsible for our evolution and the development of consciousness. And they were placed here for that.
Plus,
So
it probably adds a layer of like, I definitely won't scare this person because they can just imagine that they only saw it because of this.
yeah,
So they can interact with us
that's
on that
interesting.
level.
Maybe it creates a bit of a buffer so people just aren't overly freaked
Yeah.
out or like it's like too much. That's an interesting point. So,
Now, I have two other questions. Number one is, a lot of the experiences that humans have had with demonic possession and alien abduction, and there's a bit of conflation between what those phenomenologies are, because people in antiquity talked about demonic possession, and if you read through some of those accounts, a lot of those accounts are very, very similar to accounts that people have of alien abduction. So people have had very negative experiences with this too. Your experience was in some ways warm. River, I would say your experience was very filled with love and expression and trying to share some wisdom and trying to expand your heart, your mind. What do you
They
say
also
to
warned me that there's some entities out there that are bad and that they're actually us from the future after we go down a very dark road.
Hmm. Is it a future that's predestined or is it an alternate future?
It's one of many futures that's possible.
Oh,
They
wow.
said that there's basically they told me multiverse theory and string theory.
Do you think they stole that from like the plot line of several Marvel Cinematic Universe movies?
Which
I
came first,
hadn't even
Stanley or
really-
the entities?
Yeah.
I hadn't even really seen those at the time. So I don't, if they did, then they stole it and not me. But going with that, it was in my imagination, if nothing else. I wasn't really super aware of those. So unless they just permeated the culture so much that regardless of me not being aware of them, me being around people who were aware of them did that, then I don't know.
Well, same question for you. What do you think of, let's say you had the opportunity to speak to somebody who had a similar experience to you, but very negative. What would you say to that person?
No, I mean, that's a good question. I would say that I would be curious as to the specifics of their negative, because that can make a difference as to how I might respond. I mean, there's different, there's negative as in like, and it showed me some stuff that was true that I really didn't like, because it was hard to deal with, or it's negative as in they didn't even lube up the anal probe or whatever, or whatever kind of thing. Not to make light of it too much, but because it's an interesting point. I would say that in my own experience, it's hard to tell sometimes which is what. You have to trust ton of your heart, and you have to be somewhat strong. So when I had my experience, what ended it was, and I regretted this for a long time, but then I sort of changed my tune, especially after talking to some some alien people. But I was like, what? I just was like, what? I was a bit assertive. I was alert.
Yeah, excuse me?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And rather than being like, oh, don't worry, it's cool or whatnot, they disappeared.
Oh.
It gave me a sense that there could have been a malevolence about it. I didn't necessarily think of it at the time, so it's possible that I was visited by something that wasn't necessarily very nice. When I was telling some people about it, they said that I probably lucked out. That might have saved me, because not all the tall white beings apparently are friendly.
Yeah, actually, you know what? My ex, he had an experience that was very, very negative while he was high on drugs, Baron. And I think the reason he had that experience is because of the darkness in himself, that energy attracted the darker beings. So he had images that he was secretly a murderer and that all of his friends' body parts were in the refrigerator and that there was a bunch of evil spirits and demons haunting him.
Oh yeah, that's super dark.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, you should have had my trip because it was way better.
Yeah.
Do you think that you did have an experience that was more extensive than that, and that's all you remember, right? Because it could be that there was a time jump. It could be that there was time missing, and you wouldn't have the memory for that part.
It is absolutely possible. Something kind of tells me not, but it is possible. It just, I other than that big flash of light, I don't feel like there was ever a missing time. I don't ever feel like there was a moment where I was like, whoa, where am I? Or, it was like, so, but it's hard to know. It is very possible though. It is very possible because that has happened to people, or it purportedly has happened to people.
Do you remember that movie Contact with Jodie Foster?
Yes.
Where she has the experience with the aliens and then nobody believes her because she didn't actually leave, but maybe she did in some way.
Right, yeah, no time went by, but she had her whole astral travel experience and stuff, yeah. The book written by Carl Sagan is worth it too.
Yeah.
That's also very, very, very good. Yeah, exactly, and that's the thing, and it's like it brings us to these questions and it kind of comes back to the concept of technology or industrial, the inevitability of it and this and that. It feels like there's just so many different different possibilities. You know, there's so many different levels of connection with all of this that somehow do, I don't know, they do tie into something larger. I mean, it's interesting. And if you step even back, if you step back from the perspective of that you're looking down upon these aliens, angels, whatever, you know,
Yeah.
and these dark entities and humans here, and you're looking down from a larger of all this, then what are you thinking? Like, what are all these things you're observing, and how are they interacting with each other? Is it like, can we see it as a bigger picture, as a weave, as different parts of a cell moving in and out of each other? Like maybe we're mitochondria, and like the aliens from the, you know, Andromeda galaxy are the Golgi apparati or whatever, you know, and like, but we're all kind of part of doing our part in this larger cell that is like our own.
Have you ever heard of endosymbiont theory?
Not by that name.
Okay. Basically what it is that mitochondria were engulfed by, they evolved because a cell engulfed some smaller bacteria and then basically turned them into little like workhorse machines within that cell. And you can actually turn a mitochondria into a bacteria again if you simply change like 4 genes in it.
Oh.
And also that the like
Mitochondria have their own DNA.
They have
It's
their
not
own DNA,
related
the
to the
cell
eukaryotic
wall.
cell they're part of.
yeah, and like the fatty acid signature in their like
Cell membrane.
cell membrane, not cell wall.
Or membrane of the
Yeah, the
mitochondria.
membrane is more like that of a bacteria rather than like that of the outside of the cell.
That's interesting.
The same thing is people think is true of in plants, that the chlorophyll
Plastids,
producing, photosynthetic parts of plants are
Yeah, that's
perhaps
what I was thinking.
prokaryotic cells that were engulfed by eukaryotic cells.
Yeah, all of the different plastids, and then they evolved into chloroplasts and other types of plastids. So I'm drawing a blank on. But
Okay, so same question to you, River. Let's say I give you a spaceship, and it's a spaceship that can travel into minds of individuals on other planets and other dimensions.
minds?
Into minds. You can travel into, like, you know.
I'd probably rather travel into the minds of people that I know, because then I'd be able, like, at least to start, because then I will be able to figure out how this thing works.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's something to think about. That, like, you know, if an alien visited, they would be no more capable of understanding us than we are of understanding cats. You know, like I watch a lot of cat videos on YouTube and say, "Oh, look how much my cat loves me," or "Look how much my cat hates me." It's like, you know, you don't really have any capacity.
Not only that, but I think I would want the consent of whoever's mind I was traveling into at first.
Oh,
Like,
that's a good point. Yeah.
I would probably, like, I think I could probably travel into Pocket's mind, speaking of cats, my cat, and that she'd be okay with it. But I'd ask her, be like, Pocket, can I travel into your mind? Yeah.
Well, you know, there's an old philosophical analogy for ontology, which is that if to know what it's like to be a bat, you have to be a bat.
Mm-hmm.
And at the moment that you stop being a bat, you're going to lose all that knowledge because it just doesn't translate as your brain changes back. It's just impossible to understand a bat's perspective without being a bat. But anyway, but let's say you could.
Okay.
Let's say you could travel to another civilization that was perhaps a human pre-industrial civilization, or another civilization that's.
And they are all praying in this church saying, if there is an entity out there, it's totally welcome to travel into my mind. And I'm like, all right, cool.
What would you tell that entity?
Well, maybe something like what the creatures when I was taking mushrooms told me, which is develop love. And it's not really any more complex than that. Like, basically, try to, like, love is the opposite of fear, is what they told me. And try to be more love than fear.
And that's what you would tell another civilization.
Yeah, like, whatever you do, do it with intentionality and do it with love. Like, even if you're going to be, like, if you're going to technologically advance, don't do it to make money. Do it to cure a disease. Do it to make things better. Do it to be in harmony. Form follows function, like Frank Lloyd Wright said. So, live, walk in beauty, and travel in peace, is my dad says. Basically just,
Nice.
yeah, do things with intentionality. towards things besides being greedy. Like in our society, I mean, I didn't really grow up with the same kind of Western values that a lot of other people did, so sometimes it's really weird for me to understand, like, why everybody's so into money and, like, power and stuff. I don't really get it.
Will, is it possible to understand the foibles, the tribulations of the beings that come to us from another dimension? Is it possible to share their perspective even for a moment? Let's say they're trying to share some enlightenment with us. Is that a possibility? Is that something we have access to? Or is it such a quantum step that's such a difference that it's not even missable with our brain?
Well, that's a very good question. I think, at least, or believe that because we can connect to infinity through our consciousness and all the possibilities of things, that yes, we can at least connect and understand a little bit or empathize with them, get the message. We have our limitations. If you pump a tire too full of air, it's going to blow, but it can still receive the air that it can receive. So I believe that we can receive that connection to any of these other things to the abilities that we are, within our capabilities.
Like the cats can understand that we're not gonna hurt them and that we're gonna feed them and freshen up their water and whatever.
Right.
But
and
they
it
can't
takes some
understand
time.
why we go to work each day. They're like, where are you going? What do you need?
How do we
What
know
is
they don't
currency?
understand? They might understand it on some level. I think Pocket understands that I'm gonna leave the house at about 7 a.m. every day.
But do they understand that you don't want to, that that's something that you're doing to exchange for goods and services and get a paycheck?
I think Pocket understands that I'm irritated with that I have to. So,
All right, so I want to open it up a little bit to the rest of the room in our last 5 or 10 minutes, and I'm sorry that we didn't get started quite on time.
It's
But
okay. We'll do it again if that
we'll do
works.
this.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I just realized now that I haven't had my mask on this whole
Oh.
time.
Oh, that's a good point.
Sorry.
oh well, no worries.
I didn't
We're all
realize that either.
vaccinated here.
Yeah.
But let me, as we transition, let me say something to the people who are in the room who are listening. So we're going to start doing this as like a little spiritual discussion that's going to be free form before the open mic starts. And we'll wrap it up right now. But what we talked about today was visitation from beings from another dimension, or beings from another reality, or beings from another planet. And what I'd like to know from all of you is, I think there's two questions that I'd like to have answered. Number one, if an alien entity is visiting humans, the question is why? And number two, if we have a chance to visit an alternative reality or an alternate mind or civilization, or express our viewpoints to someone about reality, about the universe, about consciousness, what would we say to those individuals? And I'd be curious to know your thoughts on the answers to both of those questions. So while we are, so we're going to stop now, do a little transition, get ready for the open mic portion. But that's something we can talk about some more. And I want to thank Will for joining us. And Beth, we'd love to have you join us for the next session that we do of these. But just so to recap, this is going to be like a free-form thing that we do, where we just sort of talk about spirituality broadly. I guess I'll introduce who I am and what this is. We're a church, just for those people who are new here. But I like to think that we're a church of seekers. So if you kind of think of the spectrum of atheistic to agnostic, we're kind of somewhere on that spectrum. I think of atheists as people who know that there's no such thing as God. I think of agnostic as people who don't know, but also kind of don't care. And I think of myself as sort of a seeker. And that's not to say that I want the truth about God. I think, as I've said before here, God is sort of irrelevant, right? I want the truth about the universe. I want the truth about the cosmos. I want to know where the cosmos came from, if there's a purpose to the cosmos, if there's a reason for why we're here, if there's a reason why there's something rather than nothing. And I like to search for that, although I know it's in futility. And sometimes I actually hesitate to share that with people who are here, because I feel like it conveys a sense that I have the answers, or that I want to tell people something about the reality. And I don't. I just want to share the fact that I'm seeking and I'm curious and I'm lost as anyone with all of you. So, all right, so thanks for engaging that interesting spiritual discussion. We'll stop, we'll do a changeover, then we'll start the open mic portion, and then we'll, but thank you for joining us.
Cool. Thank you, Eli.
Yeah.
Thank you, Reverend.
Thanks. That was a